I remember when another briefing was at, and just after Diana died, so it must have been November after Diana died, and I said, "Ma'am," I said, "you know, your amazing speech to the nation over Diana," I said, "and the fact you did it live." I said, "I was in a pub in Westminster and the whole pub went quiet." And she said, "In a pub?" I said, "Yes, ma'am." I said, "I was in a pub watching and everybody watched you." I said, then she started to tell me about it. She said, "Well," she said, "it wasn't quite live," she said, "but, you know, we had microphones in the geraniums outside the window." And she started explaining all what they did to get it done. I said, "You know, it was so brilliant. It was brilliant." And it was, of course, at the time, when you think that there was questions in the papers, wasn't it? Where are the royals? Where are the Queen? Why is the flag not a half-mast at Buckingham Palace? And she came back with the Duke, and I remember looking at the flowers outside the front of Buckingham Palace, and there were thousands and thousands. And then she made this amazing speech, and I remember afterwards I talked to people here, and they said, you know, that was just stopped it all straight away. Everybody so forgave her, you know, and quite honestly, I didn't think she should come back. I mean, she had Prince Charles up there in a terrible state. She had the children, Diana's children, William and Harry. They were mourning their mother, and she was comforting them, and she was helping them, and I thought she should have been there, but of course people were sort of screaming, saying that, you know, that they should be in London.
Well, it was the timing, wasn't it? The timing was right. It had reached that stage, and I think she timed that speech at the right time. But sorry, Dave.
Perfect speech.
But she came back from Balmoral on the Thursday, and we can all see the picture of the car stopped outside North Centre gates, and her and Prince Philip, as Arthur said, went to look at the flowers, and I was with Prince Philip walking with them, and they were taking flowers off the children and putting them amongst all the huge lot of flowers. And one of the things I always remember, and it was really, really moving, this little girl handed Her Majesty flowers, and the Queen said something, "I'll put them over there." She says, "No, ma'am, they're for you." Yeah. And the Queen was really, really touched about that.
That was great.
It was just a lovely, lovely thought.
That story was in the film, the Queen with Helen Mirren. They used that story in there. Yeah.
Well, that kind of changed everything. I mean, we're talking, you know, we won't go into that week, but the Queen arriving back at Buckingham Palace, and you say that moment where she was given the flowers and said, "No, it's for you, Mum." I think that kind of changed everything. She had that kind of power, didn't she, as the Queen, to come back and kind of unify the nation. We've spoken lots about our memories. You have far more than I do.
We're older.
Wonderful memories.
Oh, we're old boys, yeah.
But how do you think everybody else is remembering the Queen? We know that the King and the Queen will be in Scotland this week for what is essentially Accession Day, isn't it? On Sunday, the big Braemar Games, right, and then they'll be in Scotland. Have people moved on? I mean, it's 2 years since the death of the late Queen. There's been a lot happening. We've got a new king. We've had Princess of Wales and battling her cancer, the King battling his cancer, and everything that's happening in California. Do you think enough people are taking time to sit down and remember how good the Queen was, or do you think people have moved on too quickly?
Well, I think that, you know, since he became king, I remember the day he arrived back at Northolt from Scotland, and I was there, and I said to him, you know, "I'm so sorry about the loss of the Queen." And he said it was inevitable, it had to happen one day. And he was very philosophical about it, and he asked me if I was all right. And then I started covering his engagements, and the crowds were huge. I remember we went to Bolton, and I was 30 deep at one stage. So immediately, I think the loyalty for the Queen switched to him straight away. And I've noticed that everywhere I've gone now that the crowds are going to be huge. And it'll be interesting when we go to Australia later this year that see the crowds there, because the crowds for the Queen on her last trip to Australia, as I said earlier, were massive. And I'd be interested to see what happens this time.
Yeah, you're right about the crowds. I mean, we go on these engagements, you know what they're like, and I'm surprised about how many people are coming out. They're coming out to see the King, but they know Charles as well, because we've known Charles his entire life, so we know who he is. It's a tough act to follow, but just how do you think the King is getting on? You know, do you think he's succeeding?
Oh, I think 100%. He's done a wonderful job. So far, he hasn't put a foot wrong. I mean, he's well taught. I mean, he's had the Queen teaching him for 70 years what to do, and I just think he's brilliant. I mean, his work with the environment, all the things he cares about. What do you think, Arthur?
I do. I'm his biggest fan. You know, I mean, I really love working with him. I can't wait to do the next job with him. He's just an amazing man. And I don't know about you, Dick, but he, like you, your relationship with the Queen and mine isn't the same as that with the King, but he's done more for me than I could ever possibly do for him. And I'll never forget that. And, you know, I can't wait to work with him again. And Queen Camilla, she's just an absolute joy to work with. And so for me, it's, you know, I mean, I'm 84 now and I still want to go to work with him. And just because I really just like the man so much. I think what people don't realise is the things he does for people with which nobody knows about, the kindnesses he shows to people throughout the world. And I've been there when he's done it. I remember once, so we were in Kathmandu and there was a refuge for these women that are returned from the brothels in India and after being trafficked to the brothels and of course been rejected by their families. And he came back and he said to me, what can we do for this? What can we do to help this woman? I said, what have you got in mind, sir? He said, well, I thought, he said, we'd do a limited edition of one of my paintings of the Himalayas and we'd sell it to some readers. What do you think? Brilliant idea. And we sold, I think the pictures were framed for £250 each, and we could have sold 1,000. We could have sold 1,000, but we made about £80,000, and we bought the land in Nepal. This was the money, and a German industrialist built a complex on it. But it was him. What can we do to help this woman? And he just didn't talk about it. He did something about it. And nobody knows that.
Yeah.
Nobody knows that. He doesn't, and when you try and praise him, you try and say to him, you know, oh, it was great. And he always dismisses it. He doesn't want to know. I remember we were coming back from last time in Australia and he was talking about the approval rating. And I said, well, it's up a lot, sir. Last time, you know, it's up, it's now 47%, 48%. And he starts, you know, and I said, why can't you take a compliment? And he can't, he cannot. No. He uses that title of his to do good for others, only for others, never for himself. And, you know, when people get to know that, and you can't, and he never boasts about it, he's very humble. And he said, and I think he's quoted as saying, history will judge me. And there are thousands and thousands of people that have benefited from his kindnesses, and I'm one of them.
Yeah, well, he's just obviously, you know, his mother's son. Do you either of you see any similarities between the King and the late Queen? Or any obvious kind of, you talk about his kind of interaction with people and how, you know, how great he is talking to people and not looking for headlines, but is there anything that you see?
Well, I think the thing that comes through loud and clear is they both put duty.
Oh, yeah.
Duty before anything else.
Yeah.